And one, Chair, we are live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Public Workers Public Special Meeting Agenda, August 7th, 2025. To access the meeting remotely, join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using URL on the public agenda packet. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join phone, dial 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 828-326142. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press 9 and wait to be recognized. Going to acknowledge verbally our acknowledgement agreement in the packet, and then go forward to agenda item 1, call to order and roll call.
Thank you, Chair Cayetano. I'll proceed with the roll call. Chair Cayetano.
Here.
Vice Chair Wilson.
Here.
Board Member Calavita.
Here.
Board Member Lethwich.
Here.
Board Member Williams. Is that it? Board Member Wells. Here. Board Member Edmonds. He has a legal consent previously, and Board Member Charco.
Here.
Okay, we have a forum. On behalf of the ODPA staff, we have direct audience remotely. We have investigator Mendy, data analyst Mendy, and our investigative clerk, Ben Wimberg, and myself, Jose Murillo, policy analyst. On behalf of BPD, we have Lieutenant Bonner joining us today. With that, Chair, we have a quorum.
And would you remind us of the quorum voting threshold?
Yes, because we have a leave of absence today, our quorum threshold is calculated out of 7. So to take a majority action vote, we would need votes.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, does anyone have any changes to the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda. Second.
Any objections to the approval of the agenda? Okay, can we do that by consent, Jose?
Yes, there are no objections, correct?
Don't hear any.
Hearing none.
All right, let's go to public comment.
Okay. One moment. Okay, we will now proceed to public comment. As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, so maybe a lot less time if there are many speakers. They may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. Seeing that there is no physically present attendees today, I'll go ahead and start with our virtual attendees. That said, we have currently one hand raised, John Lindsay Poland. You've been granted permission to speak. There are 3 minutes on the clock.
Thank you so much. Good evening, members of the board. I think most of you know me. I work for the American Friends Service Committee and have monitored closely the approval and implementation both of the statewide law AB 481 on military equipment, as well as Berkeley's ordinance on controlled equipment. And I know you've talked about this before, and it's on tonight's agenda as item 7 after the closed session. I think I mostly want to strongly encourage you to come up with a specific proposal for the council to consider. And so that could be delegated because, of course, editing from the dais can be fairly tedious. But I hope that you will consider a proposal that maintains the strength of the ordinance in terms of oversight as well as what it covers. And I'll just comment that I was reviewing the 2023 reports by Berkeley PD, both for the local ordinance as well as for AB 481. So this is not the ones currently that were just approved by the council or considered by the council, but for the previous year. And in that particular report, BPD defined use in the same way for both of them. So use was defined basically as deployment, which suggests that there is not an issue with that. And it's also consistent with what a lot of other departments have done around the state. Oakland is now considering its report on both military equipment for the statewide law and for the local ordinance, and is using the same definitions for each in terms of deployment and use, um, which suggests that it's not really an issue. So again, I just encourage you, even if you have to delegate it, to come up with some specific language to amend the ordinance that preserves the strength of it. And thanks so much.
Thank you. At this time, is there any additional public comment from those attending virtually? Chair, I see no additional hands raised.
Okay. Thank you so much. It looks like on our agenda, the next thing is going into closed session. So with that, we will adjourn and excuse the public.
Okay, and we will be returning in approximately 45 minutes. The webinar will remain open. Audio and visual recording will be stopped for the moment.
It's adjourned.
Chair, we are back in public session.
Welcome back, everyone. The board heard updates on 3 items. We approved staff's recommendation on 2 and took no action on the 3rd. With that, we'll go to agenda item 5, chair and board member reports. I'll go first. I think 2 weeks ago, not this week, I can't remember now. We had a busy week. I went before the council and spoke on our recommendation with respect to the surveillance cameras. And so board member Edmonds isn't here, but thanks for his work. And I was really pleased by most of the conversation because the mayor actually introduced an amendment to the policy that reflected a lot of our edits, our red lines. Which I was happy with. There was a split in the council, 5-4, over one specific recommendation that we made. We recommended a 30-day retention policy for the surveillance cameras that would align with the ALPR data, and it would also, we found out after the fact that it would align with our neighboring jurisdictions. That have a range actually of like 20 to 45 days. And so Berkeley is a really big outlier with the 180-day retention policy. And so the council members are really split on that because the department took a very hard line that 180 days was a negotiated agreement 3 years ago, and it was or like 2 years ago, sorry. And it was necessary for them to sort of like do investigations, and we would lose like investigative value if the retention if the data was purged after 30 days. And I was only on public comment for a minute, and another member of the public gave me a minute, and in my second minute I explained to them, it would be really nice if we were invited to come speak to this, because we provide actually under Berkeley's municipal code recommendations on surveillance policies. And the council members are asking really good questions, and you're only getting half the answer. You're not, and you're literally deciding between 2 options right now, and we're not there to give our recommendation. And a couple of the council members heard us, and I followed up with the city manager about having some sort of like way for us to be there when our recommendations are being heard, and I didn't get a response back from him. So, I'll try to follow up again with him later on that. There was an attempt to find a middle ground of 90 days, and that failed. And what's interesting, and this is interesting because of our past conversations, we use the I use the comparator jurisdiction argument for council members in my comments, and a couple of them rejected that argument, partly because they were like, well, maybe the department needs longer data retention timeframes because they're understaffed relative to the jurisdictions that have shorter retention timeframes, even without any evidence presented on what the other jurisdictions have, what resources they have. For example, like, yeah, San Francisco has more police, but they also have more crime. So like, I mean, like it's
Well, there's no more people.
more exactly, yeah. So it's like, there was not an evidence-based discussion. It was like kind of like throwing position statements out there that we could have, I think, contributed to. You know, we could have done an analysis, but the comparator jurisdiction didn't really help there in that specific situation. So they adopted all of our recommendations around reporting, auditing, but not the data retention timeframe. And then I'll save my other update for the other item on the agenda. That's my update for the board. Anyone else have an update? If you have a subcommittee update, you know, sneak it in here under board member report. I won't object to it.
Well, we could speak very briefly to the regulation subcommittee. We had 3 meetings in July. We'll have 2 more in August. And we're in the process of trying to get the final answer to a number of questions we have about process. And we're still sort of waiting on that, which is why we didn't have the item in the closed session that we thought we were going to have, having to do with the labor arbitration. Yeah, it's complicated. The process seems to be complicated, and we get varying answers to our questions in terms of timelines and trajectory and things like that. We are making some progress though, and possibly in a few months we'll be done with our part. What do you think?
You're overly optimistic, but who knows?
Do you have anything to add?
No.
I'm not optimistic either.
It's a grueling process, and I said.
Seriously.
Yeah. Thanks for your work.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other updates from board members?
I got an update.
Yeah.
Subcommittee related to the police quota arrest task force.
Oh, yeah.
Deputy Chief Tate and Sergeant Rafferty has provided board member Evans and I with a couple of different options of language. We have aligned on one option of language that we would like to propose to the board. I think in September when we're back from recess. We also reached out to the director's office to get an understanding on the difference in impact between including this language within the fair and impartial policing policy, as well as standalone. So we're also aligned to propose this as standalone policy language. So hopefully in September, we'll be able to make, I think, board direction and then provide our final recommendation to Deputy Chief Tate, and this should be concluded.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. It's awesome. Good to know. Any other updates? All right, let's go to number 6. Action on the 2024 PAB annual report. I guess director, and then maybe like Vice Chair Wilson after that, or you go first.
Yep.
Great. Director, are you here?
Yes, we're here, and we prepared a PowerPoint that, if the report is approved, we'll probably repurpose when we go to council. If we can have our analysts put up the PowerPoint, and if I'm looking above, it's just because of the way I have my 2 monitors set up, so I'm looking at the PowerPoint. But do we have that ready?
Yeah, it's up. Don't worry.
Okay. I don't think it's shared on the Zoom though for our virtual audience. So okay.
Go share.
Great. So you have the report before you on the packet. We are required by charter to provide a report to you on its way to council. This report covers the calendar year 2024. So this is a little distinct from the initial one we did under the new system. We call that one a triennial report because it crossed over a few years, although not full 3 years. But this is sort of the first annual one now that we're on pace again. And the charter section is section 125.16. It outlines the process and also outlines the specific elements that need to be included there. So in summary is just to promote transparency and accountability and provide our information on our oversight activities, complaint trends, and any recommendations for reform. Next slide, please. Okay, so the investigative process, that's one of the features required, and that's the education feature that's to provide a community more information about the process. For our newer board members, last year we launched online complaints portal through a company called Civil. So we've been actively using it. We're still in the process of migrating historical data, but our community members are actively utilizing this. So one of the first things we do when we get the complaint, we try to assess if there's jurisdiction, whether it's geographic or whether it's jurisdiction based on our mandate. We have authority to investigate complaints against sworn BPD members. Any other complaints against other department members that aren't sworn, we just refer it back to the department for their processing. So a complainant must file within 180 days. We screen it and we notice the relevant parties. We do our investigations that are time bound between 120 days is the sort of initial number, but we can extend up to 195 with consultation with the chief and the city manager. And I'll just highlight that that's a very constrained timeline in the state of California. The state code allows for a full year for investigation of misconduct. So we got to the 120, 195 numbers through negotiations in the BPA and the city, the BPA, the Berkeley Police Association, and it's part of the MOU. And when we we finish our report, we provide the findings to the PAB that can affirm, modify, or reject our findings. We then provide the reports to the chief. And if there's a dispute on any allegations that are standing, we take it up with the city manager who makes a final determination. There's also the opportunity of having a PAB hearing, and these are done in closed session. They'll take testimony and forward it to the chief. The hearings are not required. They are discretionary under the current model. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I can speak on this one. So we looked at complaints data, particularly in 2024. We found that 53 complaints were filed, totaling 483 allegations. Of those complaints, 51 were closed out in the year, and then there was an allegation breakdown we did, which we saw discourtesy being the top, with improper, inadequate investigation, improper search, arrest or citation, and discrimination being the bottom. And then alongside that, we also looked at BPD complaints data trends. And this was provided through the report. They mentioned that they had 35 complaints and 153 allegations. The most common allegations they reported were improper procedure, improper stop, search, seizure, and arrest, and then discourtesy. And of these 10 allegations and 10 complaints were sustained, 86 allegations and 15 complaints were administratively closed, and then 28 allegations and 7 complaints are still active at this time.
In terms of the policy complaints, what we reported in 2024, and policy complaints specifically being the forms that we get from members of the public, we received 6 of those forms and the board accepted 4 of them. Within those 4, the topics that were presented, less than lethal munitions, the interaction with downtown ambassadors, a mental health response in the SEU, as well as just overall BP record maintenance. In 2024, there were also 2 policy reviews that are self-initiated by the board, which included the AI assisted report writing and CVSA technology. And within the year, we also closed 4 policy reviews in 2024, which included less than lethal munitions, the deployment of that technology, the processing of personnel complaints, public communication practices of the BPD, and noise complaints and community mediation. By 2024, we had 14 policy reviews still open. In terms of the subcommittees, we saw growth in the number of subcommittees from where we ended in 2023 to 2024. In 2023, we had 11. In 2024, we had 13 with 1 dissolved. By the time we ended the year, we had 12 active going into this year. In terms of which ones were policy related, 7 of the 12 active subcommittees were specifically focused on policies. And some of the key projects included, of course, fair and impartial policing, and downtown task force bike unit allegations, and as well as the subcommittees worked on vehicle pursuit, and a few other projects. Okay. In terms of outreach, it was actually quite a busy year from us, starting with our 50th anniversary event that we did in January. We also had a wide variety of participation in a variety of conferences, including Maple, Notable, and Post, which the director will talk about in a few moments, as well as having a few events within the community, including participation in National Night Out, Juneteenth, Hispanic Heritage Month, and a few participations with other local programs in high schools. Director, would you like to speak more on any of these points before we transition?
Just a quick note, that photo was from last year's National Night Out. Unfortunately, we didn't get an opportunity to attend this year, but we'll definitely try to keep being engaged with the community and the department in ways that it makes sense for us to collaborate. And then just a quick note about the post opportunity. That was a really neat opportunity for our office and to participate in the production of training that's utilized by all of the post agencies across the state, which is most of the law enforcement agencies and our own Berkeley Police Department. And the specific module I was invited to participate in, it dealt with diversity and equity issues related to policing and interactions. So it was a really good opportunity to provide the oversight perspective in some of these interactions. And we'll again continue to seek out these activities within the current restraints and constraints of our staff and resources. If you can advance to the next one. Okay.
All right, so in 2024, we saw that 4,773 stops were conducted by the BPD, almost 13 per day, with a stop rate of about 4%, to be precise, 3.92. Traffic violations accounted for nearly 2/3 of all stops, with reasonable suspicion that a person was engaged in criminal activity being the second most common reason. The stop outcomes were distributed in various outcomes. So 878 resulted in arrests, 1573 were citations, 1795 were warnings, and then 186 were psychiatric holds. What we did note was that African American and Hispanic residents were overrepresented in stops. I believe the number was about 4 times more, in particular for African American residents, while white and Asian residents were underrepresented compared to their population share in Berkeley.
Can we ask questions? Is that not appropriate?
We had dedicated time for
Okay, so fine.
And then regarding training hours, so this analysis was looking into more so of how is training being distributed and how is BPD training your officers. And we noted that 7,065 hours went into 2024 for trainings. The main categories were tactical, leadership, conference, technology, and legal trainings, with tactical being at the top. And then the top topics were supervisory skills, firearms, practice management, equipment, traffic enforcement, and these are the hours that were distributed in the brackets. And then 38% of all trainings were post certified.
And I'll just add a quick note there that this was the first time, obviously this is only the second report. Last year we didn't get the opportunity to discuss training. We do get the training logs provided by the department. the ones that are signed off by the chief. We do believe there's a lot of area there to analyze and how these resources are being spent and what impacts they may or may not have in these police interactions. So there's a lot more that we can do with that set of information. We can leave it to further analyses outside of this report.
One other aspect that the annual report and charter requires to report on is the BPD's use of the early warning system. In 2024, there was a total of 4 audits, which involved 20 officers. Within those 2 audits, there were some actions that were highlighted for example, training or follow-up that was required of officers. The topics included informal traffic, safety training, the scheduling and work hour compliance review, modified duty assignments and assessments, and of course, use of force data evaluation and the reporting. And Director, we're back to you.
Yes. So some 3 main topics we noted in the report were staffing and classification challenges. This was something that early on I had conversations with our HR department and with the mayor at the time. I think one of the things that was overlooked in the transition from the PRC to the ODPA PAB model were these very day-to-day operations and classification issues that made it not have been abundantly clear how they would operate under a new system. I coming into the city, I was concerned that utilizing overly broad or generic titles may or may not be a good idea for our very specialized and niche field. And that has presented some challenges, as you may imagine, in terms of recruiting and or retention. So that's something that I'm actively trying to work with our HR counterparts and also with the personnel board. We do believe, from the office perspective, that there is more room to structure and classify the office in a way that makes sense for the specific work that we're doing. In terms of IT delays and infrastructure issues, we continue to see some challenges there. There's been an active request for almost 2 years now about getting some laptops and the system set up for the board. I've had established these systems in other jurisdictions within 6 months. I was a little surprised here when we had to engage in some back and forth. We do believe it is an effective practice to ensuring we're maintaining the confidentiality of a lot of these very important and protected records. So we're going to keep pursuing that, but it is an area of concern. It also helps us maximize and run our office more efficient. I know that we're communicating a lot with the board, and a lot of information can get lost through emails. One of the early reasons why we wanted to adopt the system is to establish that digital infrastructure where you can securely access some of these records. Some of the third-party vendors may not be appropriate. They might not be CGIS certified, which regulates criminal justice information. So there's a lot of legal and other concerns associated with not having proper infrastructure. And some of the delays we've noted in terms of investigations of public responses, policy reviews, they have continued. It has impacted our ability. This is something we need to definitely be on the lookout now that we are under a city council imposed hiring freeze. We're executing our duties with limited resources, and we need to ensure that we don't have barriers where we don't need them. You can advance the next slide, please. Okay, so the regulations were to finalize and adopt the recommendations are to finalize and adopt the permanent regulations to address or keep working towards the racial disparities in police stops and use of force, to enhance public engagement from our end and from the PAB's end. I have gone through the city council a few cycles now, even when we were in more favorable budgetary situations, and unsuccessfully lobbied for a public outreach and engagement specialist or position. We have not had the financial support for that, but we were able to work with HR to at least open up the current classification for that role to allow our office to use it. So previously, we would not have been able to use it in the way that the city personnel structure is, but now if there's funding support, we may be able to utilize that position. We want to make sure we're strengthening oversight of surveillance and specialized units and support the subcommittee engagement and policy reform capacity. One of the things we want to make sure that we're doing is being an effective resource for the PAB. Other commissions that are supported through secretaries, they're not they're not meeting as much on a regular basis. But the subcommittees, it's my understanding of the commissioner's manual that they don't get staff support at the subcommittee level, which is something that we try to provide when asked by the board and when appropriate. So we want to continue to provide that support to the PAB. Okay. And then these were specific recommendations from our office, the civil service classification systems. We have a new HR director. She has toured our office. I'm in active communication with her, Janelle Rodriguez. So we've been having conversations about having a holistic review of this system and where the resource gaps. And obviously, some decisions are still going to need the council support because they provide the budgetary support. So enhanced infrastructure and IT coordination is important that we address these issues, adopt standardized complaint and subcategorization to improve trend analysis. Some of the information we take up at the complaint level may or may not line up with what the police department collects, and sometimes that's why our reporting may look a little different than theirs. We want to ensure that there's adequate resources for civilian oversight operations and also invest in youth engagement and inclusive outreach. We've had the opportunity to host this past summer through a partnership with YouthWorks, 5 high school interns, and we thought it was a very successful partnership. They're ending tomorrow date, and we're happy to open our doors for any future semesters and working with the youth. And we're also opening our doors and we'll continue with the Berkeley University students. We have a partnership with the Public Service Institute, and we're gearing up for the fall. Well, actually, it's going to be a year-long internship that we're going to have. So, okay. And the next, one of the key, I think, important recommendations we thought it was necessary to bring up at this juncture. We've now had 2 rounds of producing this report, and we do see that there are some differences in how our bodies perceive what this report can and should be. And I think it is important to ensure the autonomy and respect for the different bodies. And it makes sense in some regards that we have different views. So we did propose some solutions potentially for council to take up. One would be to just create 2 reports. The directors would be more streamlined, or the office report would be more streamlined in terms of the data being put, and then the factual information on the day-to-day operations. And the board can potentially have a different report where they provide more narrative in terms of how these things can be and should be interpreted from a community's perspective vantage point. And the other recommendations for this sort of bifurcated model, just also council guidance. They could, through a resolution, just provide a little bit more information what the clarifying roles are, or more information to clarify what they expect out of this process. As stated in the charter, the office produces a report, it goes to the board for approval, and then it goes to council. And then long term, might require a charter amendment, but these are some things we would think it's appropriate to bring before council now.
We're almost Thursday. In terms of the concluding statements that we do or we present during this report, it's one, just the advancement of Measure II and the overall purpose of implementing a more transparent and stronger or more transparent, promoting more transparent, stronger community engagement platform, and just a more data-driven oversight consistent with the city charter's vision for independence and community-centered oversight. A big event was overall just a celebration of 50 years of oversight that we did last year, something that was accomplished while addressing overall persistent institutional challenges, including staff shortages, classification misalignments, outdated technology issues, and overall just highlighting our commitment to raising professional oversight standards, not just in Berkeley, but in the country, and strengthening public trust and promoting equitable, fair, and accountable policing system within Berkeley. The conference reference, one of the appendices that we included beyond the meet the board and the ODPA was something we included last year, which was the case allegation disposition breakdowns that we do of all the cases that we did within a year. It provides, apart from the outcome definitions, it does a brief overview of the different allegation outcomes, as well as a more detailed analysis of the BPD training orders. In terms of next step, tonight the board will be deciding on the approval of the report, as well as finalizing some of the more visual aspects of the report cover. What we'll be doing next is, of course, we transmit it to council, publish it, and then we would be coordinating on the next presentation date and the meeting type with the additional, with council, city clerk's office, and all the other stakeholders. I'll pass it back to the director for any additional comments before we take questions.
No additional comments. We're ready to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Director and team. Appreciate all your hard work. I guess I want to hear it first from Vice Chair Wilson or Board Member Wells on their process as well. Any thoughts on the process before opening it up for questions?
No, I appreciate, I think, staff's done multiple rounds of edits and tried to be responsive to our feedback, even when I think you didn't necessarily agree with it. So I appreciate that. I think it's a better product for all of the rounds of review and editing. I do have a couple of substantive questions or comments, but Board Member Wells, did you want to say anything kind of globally?
I mean, overall, I think I'm in agreement with you. Like, I think I'm sensitive to the director in this office that the process was probably more laborious than what they anticipated, and I think the scope of the work was probably more than what they were planning to do. But I also believe that if the outcome is a better, more in-depth and comprehensive report, that it's worth the extra effort.
Thanks for that. Open to substantive comments.
Yeah, I just, you know, one of the things that we struggled over was the recommendation section, and as you all have heard, we ended up landing on two different sections, one being the ODPA, the director's recommendations, and others being joint recommendations.
What page are you on?
I think I am on
24 and 25.
Yeah, 24, 25. So I guess I would just say as a comment, like, addressing racial disparities on police stops and use of force. I'm not sure if this is like an appropriate recommendation for an annual report, in that it is something that we think the city should do all the time. I don't know that it makes sense as a recommendation in an annual report. The further disaggregating complaint data, saying the board and the office will further disaggregate complaint data and promote reforms rooted in procedural justice and equitable enforcement practices. this whole disaggregation of complaint data, the first time I saw it was in one of the earlier drafts of the annual report. So I'm just not sure that that's something that we are committed to doing or that we want to do or focus on. I'll just go a little bit more quickly on enhancing public engagement. I struggled with this recommendation in earlier rounds because there wasn't much of a recommendation. Now the recommendation is that the council should allow us to redirect funds for public engagement. I don't know if that rises to the level of needing to be a recommendation in an annual report. On strengthened surveillance and oversight of surveillance and specialized units, this kind of narrative, the first time I saw this, again, was in the annual report. I'm not sure where this is coming from. And it's saying meetings where these topics have been considered by the board have consistently drawn meaningful public engagement. I'm not sure if this is like the most recent thing we've been doing on the military equipment. I just wasn't sure where those are coming from. So 2, 3, and 4, I continue to kind of question these recommendations. I have another set of comments, but I'll hold there. My other set of comments or questions is in the data section.
Yeah, I have, first I found some minor typos, but I can flag those with staff later. And I have a few substantive points. I mean, the first thing that jumped out at me was that I wasn't clear whose report this was. And then I saw that later on, and in the presentation you just made, Director, you pointed out that the charter language says that the ODPA is to prepare it and the board is to approve it. And so there's kind of, it's not totally clear what the process should be. And I think I don't know if we're going to get into the different covers, but the covers were different as far as characterizing who the author was and who the report was from. And the first cover choice, and I'll be kind of quick about this. I like the photos, but this isn't the current board. And I know this is the 2024 report, but then later on, we have the list of board members meet the board in the back, and that's different people. So I probably wouldn't use that cover with those photos, but maybe put those photos later on. On page 19 of the packet, where we talk about the description of personnel complaints, I found that really confusing. And the main thing that jumped out at me there is that we don't say in this section, and I think people are going to read this because it's important. We don't say what the resolution of those complaints was. But later on, we say of 483 allegations, the board sustained 6, and the chief agreed with 1. And I just thought it would be important to add a paragraph here, just saying what the resolution was. The people might not read beyond the executive summary, so I think it's important to have a lot of that information there. And then on page 21, operational challenges. It says that PAB and ODPA continue to experience delays stemming from limited staffing, outdated interim regulations. And I think it's really important for the council to understand through this report. It isn't just outdated interim regulations, it's significant delays in negotiations regarding our permanent regulations. This makes it sound kind of neutral and kind of passive. So I would make that point there. And then the same sentiment on page 24. In the first recommendation is finalize and adopt permanent oversight regulations. And it says the ODPA, PAB, BPD, and other stakeholders should prioritize. We have prioritized it. I think it should say the city should prioritize. And I would add a sentence saying that the PAB passed its regulations over 2 years ago, but labor negotiations have been subject to unnecessary ongoing delays. and that negotiations must be completed as soon as possible, and then to go into that last sentence to strengthen procedural complaint investigations. This is our opportunity to make this point and to express our frustration. And I know we're all frustrated, but it doesn't come through. The way the report is drafted now, I think it could be, the language could be tweaked a bit just to convey that message. But thank you for your work. That's good.
Good comments.
Yeah, good comments. I have a couple of. So I also saw a few typos, but we'll leave that for offline. In two places. Where is it? Well, one place is on page 24 of the packet, that same paragraph that Julie was just talking about in that first recommendation, finalize and adopt permanent regulations. It says here, handling complaints, investigations, and policy reviews. It's really important that people understand those regulations don't say anything about policy reviews. So those regulations are specifically about investigations related to policy complaints. So you can say policy complaints and investigations, but not mention policy reviews because they're not part of it.
Yeah.
That's pretty important. And then on page 51 of the packet, at the bottom of the page, again, it's talking about implementation of the charter, most notably the permanent oversight regulations required to govern investigations, policy reviews, and so forth. It shouldn't mention policy reviews there because these regulations don't speak to policy reviews. So I think that's the only place that it makes that error that I found. So, but thank you for your work on this, and I can send in the few typos that I found. That's it.
Did anyone else have any questions about the recommended or issues with the recommendations? I don't know.
Yeah, well, can I ask, is that, like from, vice chair, from the vice chair's perspective and Randy, from your perspective, like, I don't know if this is appropriate, but like, do you feel satisfied? Because you guys were our lead on this. And vice chair, just hearing your concerns, I'm a little like, I'm mindful of the fact that like you put a lot of time, both of you put a lot of time in, and so to be at this point where there's still, it seems like significant concerns, a little bit concerning to me.
I think to answer the question, I would say that it's rooted in, I think, a philosophical difference of opinion between vice chair and I and the director on what should be in the annual report and what should we be focusing on. So I'll speak for myself. In some ways, the earlier versions felt like a recap. And it felt like it was a report that lacked the direction other than like, we did all of these things. And I think where I wanted it to get to was for it to be as a substantial document that was a reflection upon the work that the office and the board did in the interest of public safety. And to ensure that everything in here was also in alignment based upon the charter requirements. And if it needed to be 70 pages and we had enough information to make it that long, then so be it. But knowing that this is an official document that is reflective of the board as well as this office, I thought it was important for it to reflect that.
And I guess for my part, I'd say, I think it's much better and I don't have major concerns. I continue to have concerns about some of these recommendations, like I said, like a recommendation that makes a general statement that's sort of an important value statement for us as a city, like address racial disparities in police staff. It's not specific enough or concrete enough to be meaningful. And then the concrete part that is in here around disaggregation of complaints, I just read it as like, well, where is this coming from? I don't, that's something we discussed as a board, this is gonna be a priority. So, and I could just go through each of these. The last one, that strengthened oversight of surveillance and specialized units. Again, I don't know that this is a priority for us, oversight of these units and surveillance. I think the last sentence, the city should continue to support the availability of such data. That's a recommendation that doesn't really say anything. Like you should continue to do what you're already doing. So I think one of my challenges here is, other than number one, I don't think these recommendations are very impactful. And so I don't feel like super strongly about it, but if it was up to me, they wouldn't be our recommendations. So, but I don't have major concerns with the report overall. I have a question in the data section, and then I did want to say, we have language in here about, you know, this lack of clarity around who's ultimately in charge of making decisions about the report. And I think if we are going to raise to council the idea of modifying the requirements around the report or clarifying responsibilities, we should put forward recommendations for modifying the report requirements. Because I find it odd that our annual report, and much of the square footage of the report is taken up in talking about BPD statistical data and their training. Like, this doesn't make sense to me in our annual report. So we're gonna start putting forward like, hey, we need to make some modifications here. I would like to have a little bit broader thinking about recommendations for modifying the requirement. So long way of saying, I don't have major concerns. I don't love these recommendations. I don't, you know, they don't give me a hard time. And that'll be helpful.
Can I also ask, have committees proposed, I mean, have committees proposed these recommendations, like formally? Or is this the first time that we as a board would be presenting these recommendations? I mean, or, I'm sorry,
We had a committee work on the annual report, so that's where
the recommendations, but it wasn't like, it was discussion. Yeah. So this is our moment to say, yeah, we think these are good recommendations for the PAB for next year.
Now, some of these have been discussed and worked on at length in subcommittees. For example, the racial disparities one, the specialized units one, we're doing the permanent regulations now. So these are things that subcommittees have been hard at work on.
One thing we might do in the future, and I do this on another board where I've written the annual report, is bring the recommendations to the body separately in advance. And then you can have a substantive discussion about the recommendations, because they are important. And then you can, you know, go back and integrate them into the.
Yeah, I think,
For next year.
yeah, first of all, thank you for all this work. This is a lot of pages and it's a lot of work to put together this report. And I think I understand that there were some philosophical differences in how to write it, but I really appreciate how y'all work together in producing this. I think it's, you know, well put together.
Yeah.
I think I was a little frustrated before we recessed technically that, there wasn't, you know, a draft that we could see with, if there were differences. Like, I think that we would have liked to have seen it then. I don't understand the justification really for not allowing us to see that when there were differences. And I haven't really heard why it wasn't put before us in that instance. But I think the next year, I do agree with what Board Member Leffler was saying about allowing us to see the recommendations in the first instance so that we can weigh in. I think right now, like, you know, we're at the spot where it's August and it's an annual report. So for 2024. And so I'm really happy, I'm happy to move this forward, as it's written.
Can I just ask that, I do have a couple of questions in this data section.
Yeah,
I think I'm on page 30, I don't know what the numbers are, I'm on page 18/31. This is one of the things we're saying in this first paragraph is,
18.
I don't.
31. Yeah.
Okay, the average number of complaints filed with the ODPA during the triennial report period was 34.6. In comparison, number of complaints filed in 2024 represents a 53.2% increase. And then we say we're gonna do this community survey somehow to help us understand what's driving that differential. I guess this is more of a comment than a question. If we really want to know, I think we should be surveying the people that are filing complaints with us and doing some analysis, like, do we have a lot more complaints by distinct individuals or a lot more complaints from frequent flyers driving that number? So I'm not, if this is something we really want to know, I don't know that a community survey is going to help answer what's driving an increase in complaints filed with us. That's a comment. In terms of a question, in this chart in figure 1, I think the sample size is 7 allegations. Is that correct? Figure 1, page 18/31.
So do you have that data?
Yeah, no, it's, so we saw that there was, 97 allegations. That basically the chief also commented on. So we were reviewing what the agreement rate was between those three. So 97 in total. And then as it mentions, the chief and PAB had 59 instances where we reached the same finding. So is that your question or?
Okay, so the 16.67 refers to the 97 allegations, right? The chief agreed with only one of the 6 that we sustained.
Right.
That's 16. Okay. And then the city manager reviewed 7 allegations in 2024 following disagreement between the PAB and the chief. Of these, the city manager agreed with the PAB in 3. So that's the 42.86% that's on here. So one end is 97 and another end is 7. Right, referring to the 42.86 refers to 7 allegations.
I think we can just put the whole numbers next to the percentages and that would solve.
Okay, but then another question is, the city manager reviewed 7 of these. City manager agreed with the PAB's findings in 3. And then we say the city manager agreed with the chief's findings for 6, a decrease for the previous 100. So I'm not.
6 out of 7 is 85%, 86%.
Okay, so, but it says they agreed with the PAB's finding in 3 instances. So in 3 of 4, they agreed with us, but in 6 of 7, they agreed with the chief.
So they agreed with the chief in 6 of 7, but they agreed with us in 3 out of 7. So that's where that 42%.
So sometimes we agree with the chief as well.
But
Is
this
that
is 7 following disagreement between the PAB and the chief. So this would be 7 where we disagree, right?
Right.
So I don't get how the numbers are, I'm struggling with 7 allegations where we disagreed. The city manager agreed with us in 3 of 7, but then they agreed with the chief at 6 of 7.
So I agree, I hear what you're saying, and I think they should fix that if it is an issue. And I think we should ask them to fix it if it is an issue.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, we don't need to resolve it now. If it's an issue, it needs to be fixed. Okay.
So I'm gonna ask for a motion, just. That's all right.
Can I, just one other quick thing, it looks like in one of the graphs that there are still comments, like, I think if it's in Excel.
What page are you on?
Yeah, let me pull it up. On page 15/28, see at the bottom, the total allegations, there's like green colors in the top left corner. I think those are from comments that maybe didn't get resolved, so I would just accept those.
Okay. Good call.
And
Good eye. Okay.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that the board approve the 2024 annual report. As, delegating to staff the authority to make further amendments to reflect technical corrections as identified during this discussion. And any other edits as consistent with this discussion that the director feels are appropriate.
I second that. I'm gonna second it.
And then maybe we can move to the report cover.
Then I'll just take a roll call for this one. Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Lethbridge.
yes,
Board Member Wells,
Yeah.
Board Member Bill Vice Chair Wilson,
Yeah.
and Chair Kaiser.
Yes, okay, let's go to the cover. I personally have no special cover, so
I really don't like the photographs on the cover,
Me neither.
so I don't really, maybe the third one with the, what are these shapes?
everyone,
You mean page 10
Page 10,
or page 9?
page 10, or 9, but I was looking at 10.
that looks nice.
Anything except the photographs.
People feel good with 10?
Yeah, 10 looks nice. I
As
think.
long as it doesn't. have
Do
any
we
photographs.
need a vote on that? On the cover?
I don't think so.
All right, let's just take our recommendation and let's move on. Okay, thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I know there's a lot of work that goes into this. And hopefully we will work on making it less laborious this time. For sure. Okay, let's go to number 7, further discussion action on BMC 2.100 police equipment and community safety ordinance. This is my item. I was going to submit materials for this and I didn't. So there's not gonna be any action probably from this meeting or from this discussion. And I think we'll have another meeting before the council hears it, but I wanted to give an opportunity for us to react to the subcommittee discussion. Because I presented our recommendations and if you recall, we were kind of split on the recommendations. I think it was 4-2-1, 3-2-1, something like that. And
Could you remind us what your recommendation?
yeah, I mean, the majority recommendation was to revise the ordinance, not to repeal it.
Right.
And there was the minority was to keep important elements of the ordinance through other means and just go along with it and, allow for the repeal to happen. And then there was like an abstention, but I think at the presentation, the council members, including a couple who I didn't think would agree with that, actually agreed with some of the concerns. Specifically the concern about losing the less lethal deployment reporting requirement.
Mhm.
And the reason why that became a concern was because we realized, or part of my presentation focused on the fact that the current transparency hub actually does not capture that data. And if we rescind the ordinance, that data would no longer be captured in any type of reporting that is currently done by the department. And substantively, the areas where less lethal reporting requirements would be relevant are in protest situations and in encampment sweep situations. And so I showed a couple photos from the recent encampment sweep. And so the council members actually sent a recommendation to council, basically agreeing with the recommendation to repeal the ordinance, but flagging all of the substantive concerns that we raised. And I'm not going to be able to list all of them, but the substantive concerns were keeping the less lethal deployment requirement, keeping PAB oversight, Oh gosh, I'm gonna forget what the other ones were.
Well, there were some pieces of equipment that weren't
Oh, yeah.
included in the 481.
Yeah. Those weren't explicitly mentioned in the recommendation, but I think they understood it. And I think what I'm sort of like gonna ask the board eventually when I have a proposal is, we voted on 3-2-1 to, keep the ordinance. And one of the council member, O'Keefe asked if we would sponsor a companion item that would address the concerns of the council members, that would allow for the repeal of the ordinance, but still keep the substantive components of the ordinance in other places. And so the details of that are kind of fuzzy on how it's going to work out, but that's kind of like the direction that we're kind of going right now.
Wait, sorry, you said, so repeal the ordinance, but then it would be like a new ordinance in its place, is that?
So there's different ways to do it. There's resolutions, there's policy, there's directives from the city manager. I mean, there's like a lot of different ways to do it. But, because the subcommittee recommended the council to approve the referral to repeal the item, that's the procedural posture that we're in. But there's an invitation to add a companion item.
To us, an invitation to us,
Yeah, yeah.
I would be opposed to that.
Yeah, so.
I mean, I frankly don't understand the desire to repeal the ordinance, but to keep what it says. It makes no sense to me, except that it's downgrading those things. If it's about resolutions or memos, or it downgrades it from an ordinance and makes it less imperative. And so, I mean, we provided to them something that showed you could do this in one report. We could eliminate duplicating reporting. If they want to write the companion report, they should do it, but we voted against repealing the thing, so I don't know why we would do it.
Okay.
So what's the time for, you feel like we have enough time?
I think we'll have one meeting in September to vote before it goes to council.
Okay.
And, we could have an actual. We have to say something, and I think the question is, we said something and we're gonna give the same presentation before the whole council. And I just want us to be aware of what's going on.
Okay.
I think that the hard part, I agree with you with the fact that the council member O'Keefe's position is that the department should keep the transparency hub and also fulfill the requirements of the military equipment report, which is required by state law. And what I tried to explain was, there's still duplicative reporting. If you have the transparency hub, which is not required by policy, it's not required by ordinance, it's not required, it's voluntary, something that the department has taken on. So you're not getting rid of duplicative reporting in any sense by having that as what because she wants to basically codify the transparency hub. And I'm like, well, you're gonna anyway, so.
Yeah, the other problem with it that I did raise with her as well is that it's just not as accessible. Like there's a certain kind of folk that can get on there, download CSV files, manipulate it, get the information that they want. But there's many people that cannot do that, and it's different from putting something affirmatively in a report. Where the data is analyzed for you and there's some brief narrative explanation, they're not the same thing. So, the fact that some people can easily download and manipulate CSV files, I don't think that it should be the barometer for accessibility. But I think I believe that if they're asking us to provide an alternative way of achieving the same result, then we shouldn't say no. Me personally, but it sounds like we're gonna have another meeting, you're gonna bring something forward and we can discuss it then.
Are there any other thoughts on that? I don't know. I think procedurally, when the board votes on something, that's our position. So I don't know what the.
We'd have to, I guess, take a new vote,
Yeah, okay,
but we don't need to do that today.
no. Are there, I just wanna feel that, are there any questions about what happened at the public safety committee meeting? Because there's a lot of conversations that are gonna happen between now and September. And I wanna be able to take your feedback. And this public meeting where we're not constrained by it.
It just, we've pointed out, these are the things that the ordinance requires that 481 doesn't require.
Yeah,
And they've understood that. And they've said, okay, but let's do away with the ordinance and put those things somewhere else.
yeah,
That makes no sense to me.
I agree with that.
There's some reason why they want to get rid of the ordinance, but it's not. It's, yeah. That's all.
Alright, well, unless there's more comments. It was that was short action item. Alright, I think that brings us to the close of our.
Public comment.
Oh, public comment, sure, let's go to that, not 8.
Okay, as a reminder, speakers are generally allowed 2 minutes, but maybe allowed less time to turn the speakers. They may comment on any matter within the board of jurisdiction at the time, except for within this agenda, except confidential personnel matters. With that said, there's no physically present speakers here. Is there anybody who attended virtually that would like to provide public comment? Now's your chance. Chair, at this time, I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, let's get item 9, adjournment. I get a motion?
So moved.
Great, alright, thank you, everyone. Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got you. I need to update it again.
Yeah, I